Hello everyone, my name is Lou, and welcome to Retrosaurus. In this series, we will explore topics related to the retro games we know and love, and ones that are a bit more obscure. Diving in head first, we will explore the topics, themes, and concepts surrounding these games. Our goal is finding out why do we hold them so dear, and what's so special about them. But before we can even cover retro games, we need to define what is a retro game anyway? Retro games are my passion. I started out my lifelong obsession as a young child playing games such as Burger Time, Pokemon, and Tetris. We didn't have a PC in the house while I was growing up, nor did I get my first non-Nintendo console until late in my teens. Flash forward to present day, and now I am literally surrounded by games I missed out on as a child. Almost all these games I get to experience for the first time with my community on Twitch, where I'm a full-time streamer of almost exclusively retro games. So naturally I consider myself a bit of an expert on the subject, as I get to experience all these classics without any of the nostalgia.
There's just a flex button.
Most of my content is console based, so I have more insight on that aspect of gaming as opposed to PC games. But that won't stop me from exploring those as well. Okay, so what is retro anyway? Is it determined purely by age, design, nostalgia? Does it have to be good? Does it mean it's a bad game? Is it determined by a combination of those elements? That is our goal for this episode. What makes a game retro? Now, to answer this fantastic question, we need to define what makes something retro, and then apply that to video games. Now, we can't always make a clear one-size-fits-all definition that can apply to every single game that's released. For example, what if I claim Tony Hawk's American Wasteland on the GameCube is retro, but not the 360 version, despite the fact they're the same game, and only because they released on different consoles? We have to look at more than just the games themselves, the system they released on, and the year they were released. This will be especially difficult moving forward as console generations aren't as defined as they used to be. The defined leaps between things such as 2D and 3D aren't as large either. And to that, many are now released and packed and updated over long periods of time, so they might not even be the same game they were at launch anymore. Take Minecraft for example. It was initially released in 2009, but it's evolved and expanded so much from the initial scope of the game that I have a hard time calling a game that I can play on my phone with people on the PC and the Nintendo Switch a retro game despite being so old. And it is old. Let's just get to the heckin' idea already. Merriam-Webster's online dictionary simply defines retro as relating to, reviving, or being the styles and especially the fashions of the past. Fashionably nostalgic or old-fashioned. Wow, we're just starting with a personal attack with me today, huh? Well, this gives us quite a bit of wiggle room to apply the label to something, anything, whatever. The definition itself is not clear enough to really nail down retro when applied to the topic of games. Normally, I refer to this easy to understand math formula to kind of figure it out on my own. Retro is equal to the age of the games times the lifespan of the system divided by gameplay design and multiplied by nostalgia. It's fairly simple, but let's break down each part to better understand it. Now, first let's take the age of the game. Typically I say 10 years old or more. Lifespan of the system. The year it launched, does it have an HDMI output or not? That part's really important to me. Gameplay or design, is it modern or archaic? Does it feel good to play? Does that even matter? And then nostalgia. Now this part can easily affect how people view it, so it's subjective, not necessarily integral to defining if something is or is not retro, but it can be very important. Each of these concepts could easily take an entire episode alone to fully explore, which we will do in the future. So we'll keep it simple for today. Now let's take these ideas and apply it to some examples. Tomb Raider. Year released, 1996, so it's about 24 years old. System originated, it was on the PlayStation 1, it was on the Sega Saturn, PC, etc. Gameplay and design, D-pad tank controls for 3D platforming and action. Nostalgia. Well, your mileage may vary, but for me I have absolutely no nostalgia for the series and I don't really care for it, but the fan base is very protective about it. Alright, so we have our blanks filled in. Does it pass the test? Yes, without a doubt, yes. These numbers do look correct and I did check with the doctor, so you know it's trustworthy. But seriously, this is one clear example of what's considered retro nowadays. The game is 24 years old, released on a system without HD support, nor did it even have analog controllers, two things that are found on every major console release in the past decade or more. The gameplay is dated and hard to play nowadays. I bet you can't find anyone that would tell you the game is aged like fine wine. Personally, I find it to be more of a relic and borderline unplayable these days, but I like the nostalgia most people have for this title, so take that as you will. It's worth pointing out this game was a huge milestone in game design and 3D exploration when it released. Even through the limitations of the hardware and controls, you're able to freely move around in expansive environments, kill endangered species, and steal artifacts from other cultures for personal gain. We really have come a long way, haven't we? Now let's move on to a challenge I'm pretty sure most of you will disagree with. The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess. Year released? 2006, so it's about 14 years old. System originated. Now this one's a bit trickier. It came out on the GameCube and the Wii at roughly the same time. Gameplay and design, it's your typical 3D Zelda. Nostalgia. For me, I really don't have a whole lot of nostalgia for this game. I'm mostly critical of it, but the fanbase is very protective of this one as of late, probably because there's an HD re-release of it. Now this game is an odd creature. Twilight Princess is a cross-generational release, meaning it released on consoles from two different cycles at roughly the same time. The interesting thing about this game is though it was intended to be a GameCube game. It was ported and released first day and date with the Nintendo Wii and then on the GameCube a month later. This makes things a bit tricky when we look closely at the definition we described earlier. The Wii is considered contemporary with both the Xbox 360 and the PS3, while the GameCube is contemporary with the original Xbox and the PlayStation 2. Even then, the Wii is capable of the then minimally accepted standard for HD signal, which was 480i, which barely counts now. I don't think anyone counts it as HD anymore. But putting nostalgia aside, what about the gameplay would help us come to an understanding if it's retro or not? Twilight Princess's gameplay design philosophy is essentially the same as it was in Ocarina of Time. You play as Link, you travel to dungeons, you find the item, you beat the boss, you run around in a 3D environment, and you even get to fight the same Ganon from Ocarina of Time. It's essentially the same game, right? Now, the Zelda fan of me is reluctant to even consider this a retro game. Earlier today, I was talking with some friends and even argued against that point. But the more I thought about it, the more I came to accept it as a retro game. It's old. Its concepts are rooted in the N64 era. It's even on two of the systems I can't capture without an intense series of wires and upscalers. Now, what really sets it apart from a game like Tomb Raider is the timeless design and feel the game has. If you boot up the GameCube version, or any version for that matter, I'll guarantee you'll easily take to the controls and enjoy yourself, unless you're playing the Wii version and then only I enjoy it because I like motion controls, but that's a different story. Now that we've explored two examples of retro games, it's time we look at something a bit more modern so we know what we're comparing against. Now you can probably guess which game I chose for this example, and I will do my best to be as objective as possible, but I make no promises. This is Resident Evil 2. Oh, sorry. This is Resident Evil 2. Oh, no. This is Resident Evil 2. Resident Evil 2. Year released? 2019. System originated? PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and PC. Gameplay design. Third-person shooter with survival horror elements. And nostalgia. Now, I can't imagine anyone enjoying this game purely because of their nostalgia. Now, this is a clear example of something that is not retro despite its roots and status as a remake of a classic game. Modern controls, modern visuals, modern gameplay, etc. I'd say it's a prime example to look at for the standards of a modern game. But is it even a good game? If you really think about it...
Oh, we're doing this again, huh?
This brings me to the nuance retro has come to embody. Does retro imply a certain quality? There's a dichotomy into how it's perceived and used in modern gaming that relies almost entirely on the age of the player. Even then, it's not so cut and dry. There are younger players who enjoy discovering the origins of their favorite series, just as there are video game boomers who only want to play the latest and newest games as they come out. Does retro just mean it feels terrible to play in a modern gaming environment? We as a community are reluctant to say a game that feels timeless is even a retro game. We don't want to feel old or accept that our childhood games might not be very fun. Nor do we even want to entertain the notion that those games were even bad. How many times have you heard, "Oh, but it still feels so good to play," or "Oh, you had to be there when it came out, it was a huge thing back then." So ultimately it comes down to us as individuals to understand what the word means and how we apply it. Personally, I use it positively and jump at the chance to play something new, for me at least, from decades ago that I've never touched. What about you? I'd love to hear other people's definitions of retro and see if there's something I might have missed or if there's a way that I can expand my own view. Alright, that wraps up the first episode of Retrosaurus. Thank you so much for watching. Now, this is something I've been working on for quite some time, and I've had to kind of keep it under wraps. It's been a secret to everyone save for a few people who I greatly appreciate their support and help throughout this whole thing. Now, the plan is to have one of these episodes up every 2 weeks. I'll pick a topic and I might even announce it earlier in Discord, but most likely those topics will be announced on Patreon ahead of time. Now, Retrosaurus, in addition to Podosaurus, which is my podcast side project I have going on that's been going on for a little bit over a year now, with my friends Timber Taft and Ken, two other content creators which you definitely should check out right here, will all be supported through Patreon. Now, for more information about what the Patreon covers, check out this link here, and I'll have it also in the description. In addition to Retrosaurus and Podosaurus, I'll still be creating content for YouTube, little things kind of like the World of War playthrough or the demo disc, in addition to streaming full-time on Twitch. Now you can find me at all these places listed here for more of my content, which I hopefully will have something up every day on one platform or another. Now, thank you again so much for watching. I'm looking forward to hearing your comments and feedback about this episode. And again, my name is Lou. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.